John Dervage with Our Revolution Colorado Springs. With me virtually today is Liz Rosenbaum, who's running for House District 21 for Colorado House. So first off, congratulations. I know you got, we had the delegate process or, voting last week. So you are officially going to be the Democratic runner for this position, correct?
Yes, so I am the official candidate with from County Assembly. I got 100% of the vote and no nays, no abstains, so that's pretty great. Awesome. And House District 21 is the southern west part of El Paso County. So if you think Widefield, Security, Fountain, and Fort Carson, that's the area where we have quite a bit of military retired, 3 school districts, and we have rural, small town, and suburbs here. And I've been in the different communities since 2003. And I'm really excited about this year. Even though it's going to be virtual, I'm pretty handy with all of this techie stuff. So I'm not too worried about it at all.
Awesome. So just can you explain a little bit about yourself and previous involvement in politics or in your community and why specifically you decided to run for House District 21?
Sure. So my husband and I have been married. It'll be 25 years this summer, and we're not really planning a 25-year anniversary trip until next year because of elections. So it's kind of good. We don't have to cancel anything. Our daughter is getting married this summer, and it's supposed to be in June, but that might be pushed off a little bit. We're kind of waiting and seeing how all of these stay-at-home orders go. Mm-hmm. Our son is in the Navy and right now lives in South Carolina. Our daughter lives north of Denver, and so we've adopted a couple extra dogs, so it's not too quiet in the house, and we live in a rural area of Fountain. I've been a high school history teacher with School District 3 and a small business owner up until about 2 years ago. And this is the second time I've run for House District 21. And now that it's an open seat, the demographics and all of that look really good for, not demographics, sorry, but the way everything is structured this year with unaffiliateds participating in more of the voting. Based on my numbers in 2018, I just feel really confident about this campaign for sure.
Awesome.
So
you ran. I guess I didn't realize you ran in 21. So can you explain a little bit about what has changed? Because I know, a lot more people who are unaffiliated can vote and things like that. So specifically, kind of what has changed?
Sure. What got me into it for politics in general was I owned a restaurant, and someone came in and said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm running for county commissioner. What do you need to be successful?" And I just love that interaction. Next thing I knew, I was volunteering for his campaign. I was down at the Democrat office. They asked, how I was affiliated. And I was like, I'm unaffiliated. And they're like, "Oh, would you like to be a Democrat?" And I was like, let me think about it. And I participated some more in his campaign, met some more amazing people, Pete Lee, Tony Exum, Michael Merrifield. And then I got to thinking, I really like the camaraderie here. Everyone is hardworking. They're genuinely concerned about the communities that they're running to represent. I met Yolanda Avila, and then I was just off and running. I was like, oh, I love this. And I looked into the community where I live, and I was like, well, who are my Democrat elected officials here? And I found out we didn't have any. So I was like, well, why don't we have any? And then somebody at the Democrat office looks at me and goes, well, maybe you're it. And I'm like, oh, alrighty then. So I just kind of took that same philosophy of asking people, what do you need to be successful? And, we would all like to say, oh, I need $1 million. But, every single time it comes down to, I need more support as a small business owner. I need better access to communities or county services here. A lot of veterans didn't know that there's a county veteran service center that they can go to, which helps them navigate the VA system. And there's just so many amazing things that I've learned running for office that I've been able to be a better citizen in my area. And I ran for the House District seat when I started the Water Coalition here in 2016 because our water had been contaminated. And all of our water districts did an amazing job, like right away, finding different water sources. And sorry, the dogs are, hey.
It's okay. I just noticed that my cat is purring extremely loud
Joys
as
of
well.
COVID-19 at home, but I don't have kids to bother me. I have dogs. So, anyways, I started a water coalition and getting into what is this contamination? What does it mean? The chemistry behind it. How does it affect our daily lives? And the EPA, Region 8 people, and other state offices like the state health department saying, we don't have any laws to enforce. I was like, so what? We don't have any laws? That's crazy. What do we need? And they're like, we just need legislation. I was like, challenge accepted. So worked with the Sierra Club, got a House bill turned into, legislation passed to ban this toxic firefighting foam. And then we have some things going on this legislative session as well to kind of fine tune some of the wording, then participating with that. And even up at the federal level, I went to Washington, D.C. and met with our Congress people and senators. And it just so happened to be the weekend that I went to DC was one of the breaks they came to Colorado, but I got to meet with their staff, and it was pretty great to get a tour of, just the Capitol and all this extra stuff to really feel like our voices can be heard. And we've been selected as one of 8 communities of over 300 to get additional testing. So I feel like without running for office before, I wouldn't have realized all the resources that are available. So we've had monthly meetings with our coalition. We've brought in guest speakers all the time. And so I jokingly say we turned our anger into action. And when we were saying, hey, we don't have a seat at the table, we're like, okay, well, we just have our own table and you're going to come sit and talk to us. And that has worked really well. I'm really good at organizing, and dogs are fighting again. Really good at organizing and working with people and finding out what they need to be successful. And that is just, I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah. So again, it sounds like, a lot of your involvement, it came out of like a community need, which I think is really admirable, and something I think
right.
a lot of I would hope a lot of people kind of like adapt at some point, because a lot of people look at a situation they're facing in their community and think like, well, this is just not good, but they don't really know how to implement a change. So obviously, running for office is definitely a
right.
really good way to do it. So can you explain a little bit more about so you said there, and I've heard a little bit about the contamination issue. And you said that there was some legislation that was passed relatively recently, like in this latest session. Is it specifically like banning that? Was it PFAS or what's the chemical called?
Right. So I've almost turned into a chemist at this point, which is kind of interesting. So PFAS, PFAS, is a class of chemicals, and there's 4,700 different types. Then I highly recommend everybody watch that movie that came out, Dark Waters. Mark Ruffalo played Rob Bilott, and I've actually got to meet Rob Bilott a couple of times, and he's just this amazing guy. And I just feel a good connection with him, where you find something wrong in your community and you're just relentless trying to get it solved. And even though you're like one person, you're not, because you have a whole community working together with it. So we've got these PFAS chemicals, and in the movie they talk about PFOA, PFOA, which is Teflon. Then there's PFOS, PFOS, which is like Scotchgard waterproofing. So the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has decided through to be a little bit more aggressive towards these type of chemicals, because there's coalitions like ours all over the United States pushing for these chemicals to be banned. But the one we've been contaminated with is a toxic firefighting foam, PFH little XS, perfluorinated aqueous film foaming film. Aqueous film foaming foam. Okay. It's a tongue twister for sure.
Yeah.
So when the EPA says PFOA, PFOS is at a non-detect, like it is up by the Air Force Academy, our coalition has been educated enough to say, well, yeah, because you're not contaminated by Teflon or Scotchgard. You're contaminated with PFHXS, which is toxic firefighting foam. So we found an organization to use some litigation encouragement to the DoD and U.S. Air Force Academy to release the PFHXS levels, which are 200 to 500 parts per trillion, and the limit is 70. So we're smart enough to realize when the DoD, Department of Defense, is playing semantics, we're like, that's, we're too smart for that. And that area never had a community meeting. So the legislation we passed last year is banning the use of toxic firefighting foam, and working with Representative Tony Exum on that, because he's a retired firefighter. And we want to protect the health of the firefighters, because they're right there using it. They've been lied to by the chemical manufacturers, saying, they tell everyone it's like soap, but it's not. It's a cancer-causing chemical. And when you lie to the people using it and they're not using precautions, they're going to suffer from cancers and health problems. So the first and foremost is to stop putting it into the environment, stop dumping it. There's not a way to dispose of it just yet, but science is evolving now that we're onto it, and we're like, stop putting this into the environment. We'll figure it out later how to dispose of it. And because we don't want our chemical here to go somewhere else in another state and then be a secondary contamination trying to dispose of it, right? And then we don't want to do a mandate without funding. So violators will be fined for continuing to use it, and then that money goes into a firefighting fund to pay for their health care when they do get sick. And this year, our legislation is including money for small fire districts that may have it, so they can get it off their shelves and order new supply that is supposed to be less toxic, and then not using it in the same capacity they did before, because now there's an understanding it is toxic and it's not like soap. So we're using a well-rounded approach to avoid negative consequences in other areas, especially to the people having direct contact with it. The current legislation we have right now is now on hold because the legislative session has been on recess for a while, and we've had 2 readings in the House, and then it still has to go to the Senate, and it's been to appropriations for funding. So it's at least gotten that far. So hopefully the legislative session reconvenes and I get to go back up to Denver and advocate for it.
Yeah, so
but I'll continue with that, and yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So like,
Go ahead.
and I think it's something that's, again, it's really kind of like a good example of how, you know, even if, it doesn't matter really if what level you're at, or if you are an elected official or you're not, the fact that you can still make a difference. So like you've actually, you know, crafted the wording for this legislation is like, and like advocated for it on the floor. That's, or, you know, on the, in Denver in the
Right.
Capitol. That's really cool. And I think again,
Mm-hmm.
like, again, a really good success story about what, you know, people can be doing at all levels, based off of if they see a need. So, other than obviously,
Yeah,
you know,
and finding the wording for, yeah, sorry, but finding the wording for legislation is not as daunting as you would think. There are experts at the Capitol that work on the wording for it. It's it's as a citizen, you working with the elected official who then uses their resources at the Capitol to craft the bill. The first one was funded through the Sierra Club, and there's no way we would have been able to do it without them paying for a lobbyist to really work with all of the different legislators. But if it wasn't for our community calling, writing letters, going up to Denver, it wouldn't have had such an urgency without it. It would have just been something, you know, somebody's pet project. And really, it's critical pieces of information that's going to not only affect what we have going on here, but, you know, across Colorado, and even all the way, because the state can't tell the federal government what to do. So that's why it's important we're working with elected officials in Washington, D.C.
yeah,
So there's some limitations there. But it's fascinating, you know, to just go up there and meet with elected officials. And the Capitol is amazing. It's gorgeous. And you just walk around and you see little statues and busts, you know, and all these little nooks and crannies of all these famous Coloradans who have improved education and healthcare, farming. The doors on the elevators are gorgeous because it represents the early beginnings of the state of Colorado and Native people who lived here. There's some paintings of them and all of their amazing histories. I like to just kind of spend some extra time there and walk around. Even outside around the Capitol is phenomenal. It's just the coolest thing. If you haven't done it, just go up there for a day. It's really
that's,
neat.
yeah, that's something I actually haven't done. I've been to capitals, and because I used to live in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, so in capital of Minnesota, and when I was growing up, I went to Madison in Wisconsin. But yeah, I have to go to Denver. I have to check that out. Seems like a cool building. Just
Right.
moving on, just because I know again started a little bit late and just want to kind of cover as many topics as we can. What are some of your other, you know, key interests as a someone running for a, you know, elected position? Like, what are some of the other things that, you know, you talk to your constituents or people that you know, you hear about and as you go and are campaigning?
Sure, sure. Two other key pieces of legislation that I 100% like. There's three bills that 100% I'm going to do as soon as I'm on, you know, day one there. The first one is we need to change statute of limitations for litigation for people who have been contaminated. Right now it's 2 years. If you're in an auto accident, you have 3 years to make a legal claim for injuries, and we need to change the contaminated one to 5 years, because this chemical that gets into your body, you may not have any adverse health effects for up to 5 years later. And then that clears up what is always disputed in court. What is your known date of being contaminated? So our statute of limitations has run out with 2 years, but if we had a 5-year limitation, the people who have been contaminated have more rights than the wealth of a corporation. The other bill that I'm going to 100% work on is making broadband a public utility. And that is critical right now with students who are not allowed to be in school because of COVID-19. not only is there a socioeconomic, status of someone can't afford a computer, but even if you could, rural kids are missing out on education. And even rural kids who need more of an advanced placement um, class in certain subjects, if they could have access to broadband to um, tune into another classroom in another school district, they can continue their education just to a new level. And rural areas like mine, we don't have CenturyLink or Comcast. We have HughesNet, which is a satellite internet, and it's okay, but it is so expensive to get it. And then there's limitations of streaming and all that nonsense, right? There's even small pockets within Colorado Springs that property owners of rental areas are not upgrading their property to get internet. And with it being the second information age, it's just wrong to not have access to basic information or educational classes, online learning if you're an adult and you want to advance in your career better if you don't have access to internet. If phone lines can be run to a new developed area, then everything else needs to be run there. And the only way to do that is through government mandates. I don't like to do mandates without funding. So there would have to be a huge discussion of what does that look like for rural areas. But if we wouldn't have done that, during the New Deal, we still wouldn't have electricity or indoor plumbing or, all of that stuff. So we have to make that transition a requirement for everything that's being built now. Like this, where I live, it was built 20 years ago. All of that could have been installed, and it's just ridiculous. It's not. The other thing that I want to do, we need a state base for teacher pay. Right now, first year teachers make about $37,000 a year. That is poverty level for someone who has gone to college and teaching all these kids. And if you think about it, within a couple of days, these teachers have gone through from an in-classroom curriculum to online or worksheets if kiddos do not have access to the internet. And I would like to see first year teachers make a minimum of $50,000 a year and really good incremental increases there. Teachers who have pursued their master's degree and haven't even been acknowledged for that completion, they need paid accordingly. Otherwise, we're going to have all this going on and no one's going to go back to teaching because it just doesn't pay. And one way to fix that is a base salary straight across the board. There's a lot of states that have done that successfully, and there's no reason that we shouldn't do it here either.
Yeah.
So those are my three bills.
Yeah. So hitting on the second one there, I 100% agree with that. Like, I do not understand how people how people like are expected to succeed. Like, especially like, again, just look at like what's happening now. Like, there's a lot of things that the COVID virus kind of, I think, brings to the forefront of people's attention, and having differences in internet access is so important. It's so important to address, because especially as people like are forced to work from home if they can, or just staying up to date with things that are news that is coming out about new guidelines and new information. I mean, it's so critical, and that's just for COVID. Like, imagine that, like you said, for like education and for student learning. Like, it's so important that everyone has access to that. So has that been introduced in other states that you know of? Like, is there like examples of like that Colorado could draw from to like successfully have that be implemented?
It's been debated every legislative session. I think you just have to wait for the right event to happen to really, really push it as being treated as a public utility. And my husband and I, we did our research before we moved out here last year. We called Comcast and we called CenturyLink. They're like, oh yeah, we have services out there. We get a mortgage, we get a 30-year mortgage. We move out here, all our stuff is in the house, we've remodeled, and we have the service techs come out here and they're like, well, I know that they told you their service, but there's not a single line out here. Yeah. So I did some research just last week and I contacted CenturyLink. I was like, hey, do you have service out here? They're like, oh yeah, we do. What day would you like them to come out? And I was like, prove it. So they did their research. So the other thing we need to have happen is if those service providers are lying to homeowners, there needs to be consequences, because that's to me, that affects property value. You're going to spend how much on a house? And sure, we live in a rural area, right? So there's certain things that we maybe want to give up. But if we fairly do our research and we're lied to about services that are available, there needs to be consequences for that. Like, we have a phone line, but there's no internet with that. We have to get a satellite internet. So that's just basic business practice. Anybody else would do that, they would be they'd be in trouble for behaving that way, trying to tell you have a service you don't. So, I mean, and we even went so far as doing the down payments and buying the connections and all the boxes, and then the service rep comes out here. And so, I mean, we spent a couple $100 and then it took several months to get our money back even. So, false advertising. We just have to fix it. I mean, we can't. It's stupid not to. It is just absolutely ridiculous to say, look at it and say, well, you get what, because you moved out somewhere. There's people in town. Our first house we had built in Widefield in 2003. Comcast did the same thing. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to be servicing you, next year. We lived there for 10 years, and it took them 9 years to get a line out there. So, and we're in town. I mean, that's just the developers not running lines, the companies not running lines, and we just have to legislate it and make them do it.
No, I 100% agree.
And I know I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that just seems criminal too. The fact, they specifically lie about what they actually can offer. The second, or I should say the third item there as well. Standardized teachers pay, or at least like from a base pay perspective, I also 100% agree with. It just, I can't really imagine a harder job in this day and age as a teacher, because I mean, it's obviously it's incredibly critical and utmost importance for future generations, but also it's almost like a service industry where you have to talk to parents and talk to kids and do so much extra work. It's not just a 40-hour job. There's so much effort that goes into it after the class, and grading and a lot of teachers have to pay for their own supplies. I mean, that's just, it doesn't make sense how that level of effort for a job and how critically important it is to be paid $37,000 is insane.
Right. And if you're a high school teacher, you have 150 students. You have 5 classes. There's 7 classes, and you get 2 for planned periods. And high school teachers usually teach a couple of different subjects within their realm of expertise. So having 150 students, 30 right there is a captive audience. You can walk around the classroom and see if they're doing their assignments, right? Virtually 150 kids. I mean, that's just insane. And talking with some teachers, teachers had to fight for planned periods still. Sure, we're all virtual, but first and fifth hour, my planned periods, I'm not going to be on the computer interacting with students because I have to go over my lesson plans. I have to change my lesson plans today. Then if you are teaching, first or second grade, you really need that one-to-one interaction with those kiddos. And so many of my friends are professional people that are now working from home. They're struggling to find 4 hours during the day for homeschool. And generally that is falling upon the moms to do. And if they're career professionals or small business owners, their careers are taking a hit right now. Some kids are going to do good with it, but other kids, they need that interaction. When teachers go back this next school year, my heart breaks for how much work they're going to have to do. Evaluating the kids, picking up where they're at, moving them forward. It's just some kids are going to excel and need to be bumped up in certain grade levels, and then others, it's just the kids who are hit the most are the ones who don't have that financial security with their family. So
and I think I think to close this out, because I know we're getting a little short on time. I think it's a good point too, just to mention. So, do you have anything just you're doing to stay busy, stay active, stay positive in the pandemic life that we find ourselves in?
Well, yeah, I took some extra training classes through Emerge to turn my door knocking campaign into a virtual one. So if you go to my Facebook or Twitter page, I'll make sure we put it out there. I do simple asks like the one today. If I could have 3 people commit to $5 a month, we can pay for my Zoom platform, which is like this, and interact with my voters. So it's just a unique situation, and I love problem solving and working around situations. So I was sad for a little bit. I was like, man, all this that we did, and I was like, well, the people are the same, the message is the same, the platform is different. We'll figure it out. And sure enough, like 2 days later, Emerge came up and said, with a Facebook post, would you like to have a training class and turn your door knocking into virtual? Yes. So I've been doing that, and it's going to be okay. It is what it is. And we got an extra rescue dog, so we're looking at behavior modification, so they're happy, healthy dogs, and they're just so cute and lovable. I check in with my kids to see how they're doing, and they're both essential people. And my son passed his Navy boards, and he has to muster once a day for 30 minutes with 100 people, and then they're sent home. So they're like, wash your hands, change your clothes, don't wear your shoes in the house, all the mom stuff from the other side of the United States. He's like, I know, Mom. So, and then my daughter, she's cut down to like every other day at work, and then works from home, and then goes into the office, and same thing. Are you guys washing your hands? Don't wear your shoes in the house. They're like, we got it, Mom. So I do miss them, but
that's always good.
I like virtual stuff, right?
Yeah.
They're like, geez, Mom, you told me that already. Well, you left the house, and I can't say shut the front door anymore, so I can at least tell you what to do and take your shoes off.
Perfect. Yeah. I think it's
there's a lot. Thank you for doing.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's my pleasure, and we love talking to you again. I think there's probably a lot more we can talk about. Probably have another set up another interview in the near future. But yeah, thank you for spending 25-30 minutes with us.
Thank you.